Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center for our pre-flight briefings for the final flight of the Space Shuttle program, Atlantis' mission to the International Space Station, STS-135. We have a series of briefings for you today, the usual set of briefings to lay out the entire mission for you ahead of the launch, which is scheduled for next Friday, July 8th. The first briefing is our usual program overview briefing with the two program managers. John Shannon is the program manager for the Space Shuttle, and Mike Suffredini is the program manager for the International Space Station. Of course, we'll hear from both gentlemen, and then we'll take questions here and at other NASA centers that are online. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. I tell you, I'm just extremely happy to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you about STS-135. This was a flight that we were not sure as late as really this January that we were going to have the opportunity to fly. At that time, we were discussing the potential of maybe moving the STS-335 launch on need stack over to fly STS-135. But if you think about where we were in January, it looked pretty ambitious to be able to do that and fly in late June as was being proposed. In January, you know, we had our significant technical issue with the external tank still in front of us that we were vigorously working through. We had two flights that were ahead of us, including the really ambitious AMS flight that we just flew and landed last month, and it just looked like it was quite a hill to climb, especially with the reduced workforce that we had, knowing that we had been going through this progressive series of layoffs, and that the team that was executing all of this activity over the first part of this year the contractor side would either move to a different program or be laid off this summer. In addition to that, the funding was uncertain, and we had to stay below pretty aggressive budget marks to allow us to extend the program out to go fly it. And here we are today. And I just am so impressed by the team, because we just came off of a great flight readiness review with really no issues at all. The review consisted mostly of talking about past issues and what we had done to mitigate them for this flight. We did a tanking test, which showed the rigor with which we approach our technical problems, and it could not have gone better. The tank performed flawlessly. We did our X-rays to make sure that we were in good shape, and here we are, ready to go. Roughly about 10 days after the initial launch date of June 28th was just kind of thrown out, even like last summer. And for this team to have come that far under the circumstances that we've been living under this year, and complete the two missions and then be ready to go for this one, I think is just a huge testament to how professional they are. And the payload, you know, for this flight, I think it's really fitting that this is what we're going to fly for the last flight of the shuttle, to get the International Space Station just completely squared away for its extended life, and we can phase over to the research and utilization parts of its life. So here we are, poised to finish strong and preserve the legacy of everyone that has been a part of the shuttle team, and I'm just extremely proud to be part of that. Thanks.
Mike.
Well, good morning, everyone. As John said, we're extremely pleased to be sitting before you today talking about this flight, STS-135. From an ISS perspective, it is carrying up critical supplies. Some folks look at this flight and perhaps don't see the excitement because we don't have a piece of major assembly hardware going up. But we've got the MPLM as full as we've ever had it from a cargo perspective. We've got the mid-deck full. All of these supplies are going to be the lifeline to help us extend our period of time we can go on orbit before our commercial providers start flying regularly to ISS. And that was critical for us to give them the time they need to make sure their vehicles are ready to go fly, finish their development, get their test flights behind them, and then start servicing ISS. So from our perspective, while it doesn't look very sexy, it's one of the most important flights that we've ever had come to ISS from a shuttle perspective. This on orbit concludes a period of extremely busy time for us on ISS. We have changed our focus to research. About a year ago, we started giving research instead of the previous way we operated, which was the systems guys did everything they had to do, and then the time that was left was devoted to research. We, about a year ago, shifted to the other way of doing business, which is first you give research what they require, and then you figure out how to do the system work around that. But be that as it may, of course, you always get challenged, and this last year, things started kind of moving to the right. We had the shuttles moved, we had ATV moved. We got things kind of bunched up so that this last few months we've been extremely busy on orbit. We had STS-134, we had an ATV that had to boost the ISS to the highest altitude she's ever been at. We had to get the ATV off and get the progress on, and then we have ULF-7 coming right in the heels of that. So following ULF-7, we will be able to transition and provide more time to research, whereas prior to that time, we weren't able to devote the total amount of time that we had been asked, and that was weighing heavily on our minds. But in the end, you got to do what you need to for the system so that it can ultimately support research in the long run. During this period prior to ULF-7, we expected that we would not have much time for research. We showed weeks for anywhere from 0 to 10 hours, and we challenged the team way back prior to STS-134. Cumulatively, compared to what we thought we were going to give them, we were able to give them about 100 hours more than what we'd expected. So the team has really focused hard on doing research while we've wrapped up these last few missions to ISS. This particular mission will be a challenge for us as well. They all seem to be, but this one has its own unique challenges. Of course, we're flying a crew of 4. We're doing that in order to make sure we have what we used to refer to as CSCS. I don't know what we call this case that we're flying into today, but we've built a case around protecting the crew if in the unlikely event we have a shuttle problem. Before, we used to plan to bring another shuttle up, and we always had one ready to fly in time. We made sure we had the logistics to support. On this particular flight, we have a plan for returning the crew. We have to utilize the Soyuz. We do it over an extended period of time, and we gradually bring the crew back down, and we had to make sure we had all the supplies on orbit to support that. And that's been looked at closely, and we're in a good posture. So 4 crew allows us to do that. Of course, 4 crew then makes it difficult to get all the work done on orbit that we normally do, and this being Atlantis, we don't have the extension time on orbit as we do with the other Spitz-capable vehicles. And so with 7 planned dock days and 4 crew, it's going to be extremely busy on orbit. But we've got one of the finest crews we've ever flown. We have an incredibly experienced ops team. The design guys and analysis folks on the ground have run a number of cases for various versions of how full the MPLM would be, and that's more difficult than it sounds, but you have to know what the load cases are. You need to make sure the CG's right. When you put a mass that big in the payload bay of the orbiter, you have to know that it can control itself on entry and landing. So that's a phenomenal amount of work that was done. In addition to that, we have a number of critical ORUs, many of which were repaired and were on longer schedules. I had thought that maybe we could move this flight a little to the right, but we weren't really ultimately able to do that. So therefore, we sent the team off with actions to go get their hardware ready to go fly, and they did a tremendous job. Each of the ORUs that we needed to have on this flight they picked up the pace, they got them refurbed and in the MPLM, including something we call the advanced RIFTA. This is the tank that takes the brine from the urine processing assembly. Typically, we fill those up and have thrown them away, and they're big, heavy tanks. We've gone to a process now with this new design where we can empty the tank on orbit, and then we dump the brine either into the Rodnik tanks or disposable cans or bags. So the team has done a remarkable job getting ready for this flight, and in spite of how simple the cargo bay may look, it's a very critical flight to us, and we're ready to go. And I think it's very fitting last flight of the shuttle to play such a critical role in the future success of ISS. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for questions. To make this easy, we'll just run the front line if you have a question. We'll start right down here on the front. Where's the... Or back
Tracy
there.
Wilson, USA Today. One question for each of you, if I might. For John Shannon, can you run us through the most recent shuttle employment numbers, where your workforce stands today, and what you expect it to be by the end of August? And for Mike Suffredini, can you remind me of the numbers of how long the supplies on the shuttle will get you to have a healthy ISS life versus where you would have stood without this flight? Thank you.
Okay, so the first was the question on the current workforce and the plans for the workforce. Right now, Tracy, we're down to those required just for sustaining engineering and operation of the last flight. So it's about 5,500 contractor employees right now, and that's spread across Texas, Utah, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, and a little bit under 1,200 civil servants. So we're at about 6,700 total people working on the shuttle program. And the big layoff is really right after the shuttle landing, and then we will keep some people in Florida for down mission processing. So on July 22nd, if we launch on July 8th, there will be a significant loss, about 3,200 contractors. There are progressive other layoffs in August, in the middle of August, for all of our prime contractors and the subs. So they will go into the transition to retirement, which is just the configuration of the vehicles and the dispositioning the hardware that's under 1,000 people total. So that's where we are right now and where we should be in about a month and a half.
And Tracy, to answer your question, this flight, and assuming that the HTV and ATVs fly, which is expected, we should be able to do nominal operations with research Support 6 crew through 2012. And so that was our goal with this flight. This flight gave us about 6 more months on orbit worth of supplies. And so that was critical to us, because that sounds like it's not that much, but what it does is give you time to manage. If the shuttle didn't fly, we'd have to start talking today about reducing the amount of research we were going to do in order to make sure that the only thing on the HTVs and the ATVs were going to be supplies for the crew. So this gave us the added flexibility of letting us continue research, take care of the crew through 2012. About midway through 2012, though, we'll have to have that look again and say, okay, where are our vehicles and our commercial vehicles, and if we get nervous about their ability to support within that next 6 months or so, then we will be having that conversation. I would tell you today, I think they'll be fine. I'm expecting to see them here in late fall, early next year, and that'll be in plenty of time to keep the logistics train going.
Let's get Bill right there.
Bill Horowitz, CBS News, with one for each of you. John, what's the mood like going into this flight? You spent your career in this, and so have all these other people, and the moment's finally gotten here.
Well, you know, I can't. There's a big awareness of this is the last, shuttle activity that we're going to do. This team is not really focused right now on last. I see a huge amount of determination to make sure that this flight goes extremely well. There's a lot of pride too, because like I described in the opening comments, in January this was really ambitious to get to the point we're at right now, and the team is aware that carrying on their shoulders is the responsibility for 30 years of legacy of this iconic program, iconic space program for the nation. And I see a lot of determination, and the team has had time to prepare for the end of the program. It's been interesting. The folks that have been kind of on the outside of the program are having a more difficult time, I think, dealing with the end of the shuttle than the actual shuttle program, because we've been looking at it and preparing for it and planning for quite a while. You know, it's tough to break up a team that has performed so well for so long. I am extremely pleased with how the contractor leadership has treated their employees, either moving skills to other programs that they have, or folks that they cannot move to other programs. They've put together very fair severance packages, and they've worked very hard to try to have things like job fairs and other workforce activities that can help them get placed in other areas, and that's been very successful in Texas, in Florida, and in Alabama, and really everywhere. So, you know, you're balancing two things. One is you're trying to treat the workforce with a tremendous amount of respect, and you're also trying to get the job done. And nobody takes it for granted that, you know, every shuttle flight is going to go extremely well. You have to work very hard to ensure that that's going to happen. And that's just what I see with the core shuttle team right now, is just an extreme determination to make sure that it goes well and that we end up right.
And one quick one for Mike Suffredini. Can you expand on your last answer about COTS? Tell us what you're thinking with SpaceX with flights 1 and 2, and when you expect these guys to fly. I was interested in the impact of the engine fire on the Taurus and just how all that stacks up.
Well, let's see, for SpaceX, of course, these aren't set. And in this environment, these guys are trying to perform. So they would like us to show aggressive dates to challenge the team and make sure everybody focuses on them flying as soon as they can. That's balanced with us. We have to pick slots for them to come to ISS that meet our needs, that we can be ready for them. So we're having those conversations. With SpaceX specifically, we're looking at combining. They want to combine their remaining 2 demo flights into one and come to ISS. I'll actually have that conversation this afternoon and decide whether or not we can be comfortable with that with our friends in the COTS office. And then, assuming to that, I would expect to see that demonstration flight late in the fall. I would tell you a month, but then they, everybody gets upset when we lean too far forward. But I would say in the last quarter of the calendar year, probably midway through the last quarter of the calendar year, is probably what you'll see us shoot for that SpaceX flight that actually docks to ISS. As far as orbital goes, that's a little more challenging. They also wanted to try. In fact, currently, I think we showed them in December. They were trying to get at a test flight before that now, similar to what SpaceX did. The engine failure they experienced on the ground has yet to be rolled into the schedule. They're still